Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and I just want to welcome you this June 27th, 2013. This is our sixth episode for the summer, and we've got another great show this evening. Last week, as you recall, I had two great guests. This week, I've got two more again, and I'm really looking forward to both of these gentlemen. The first one I'll introduce in just a moment, but the gentleman coming up in about an hour's time is Tom Shaw. And he was a 12-year Division I head coach for both Vanderbilt and Tulane University. And during that time, he's helped a number of outstanding student athletes, such as former All-Americans and current PGA Tour players, Michael Thompson, who won the 2013 Honda Champion, and Luke Liss. So he's going to be coming on in roughly about an hour's time. But first, let me just introduce my first guest. This was a gentleman, actually, that was referred to me by a guest that I had a few weeks ago, Nicole Weller, who is a teaching professional up in Savannah, Georgia. And this gentleman and her are obviously friends and acquaintances. And he's written a great book that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. His name is Joel Zuckerman. And you can find him, and you've probably heard of him, the Vagabond Golfer. Was recently called by one of the most respected, sought-after golf writers in the Southeast by Golfer's Guide. And, of course, legendary golf course architect Pete Dye said that not only is he a great writer, but a great friend to him and his family. And I want him to come on and talk about his book tonight. Welcome to this program, Joel.
Thank you very much, Ted. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you, as I said, and I've been looking forward to this. I know that you've been away for a few weeks, and we got you scheduled to come on tonight. And I want you to just let the listeners know what the name of the new book, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the other ones in a minute, but what the new book is called, and then we'll get into the book.
Okay. Well, I've just released a book, my seventh. It's called Pros, Extraordinary Club Professionals Making Golf Great. It's the first book ever written in praise of the club professional. So golf books have been written in – the first golf book came out in the United States in 1893. So over 120 years, there have been thousands and thousands of golf books written. Mostly, as you can imagine, instructional, a lot of humor, a lot of coffee table, a lot of inspirational stories, but there's never been a book, to my knowledge, dedicated to what I call the beating heart of golf, the club professional. So I decided to write a book in praise of 30 of the most extraordinary club pros in the United States.
Right, and that's really, just to let the listeners know, Joel actually called into the program a few minutes early, and we were just talking briefly off air, and that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to have Joel on the program, as I know that, and as he's mentioned, there have been literally thousands of books that have been written on golf, and everything from the swing to different aids and things like that, and humor, as you mentioned, Joel. But there really hasn't been anything on the teaching professional that I'm aware of either. So this is certainly a great book, and I think obviously we want the listeners to, and we'll get into that in a little bit, how they can get their hands on a copy of that. But I noticed in some of in the press release, Joel, that you had sent me, you had mentioned about that these particular people that you've written about, whether all of them or some of them have sort of influenced you through your journey in life. So just talk a little bit about some of the people that you've written about, and maybe some that particularly stand out. I mean, I don't want you to necessarily play preference to anybody, but maybe some of the ones that stand out in your mind that have really influenced you.
Sure. And there's no time like the present because, your audience drifts in and out. We might as well mention right from the jump, this book is available only at prosbook.com.
Okay.
So forgive the plug right off the jump, but, you said we'd get to it later. If it's up to me, we'd mention it every 30 seconds. prosbook.com. Anyway, the gist of it is a young friend of mine who used to be an assistant pro for Bob Ford. Bob Ford is probably the preeminent club pro in the nation. A friend of mine here in Savannah said to me at a Christmas party 18 months ago, you should write a book about Bob Ford. He revolutionized retail. He's for your listeners, Bob Ford is the head professional at both Oakmont up in Pittsburgh and Seminole in Palm Beach. He holds both jobs concurrently and spends 6 months in each location.
Right.
So I thought it was an idea that deserved a little bit of exploration. And when I spoke to Bob Ford, he and I agreed that a book about him is not exactly a book about Tiger Woods or a book about Jack Nicklaus. It would be very limited interest, even though he's extremely accomplished. Then another friend of mine, another young fellow that I know, also a former pro, when I asked him what he thought of the idea about me writing a book about Bob Ford, he said, "Why would you just write about Bob Ford? Write about a bunch of the best of the best."
Right.
And that is how the canvas was given to me. Then it was up for me to paint the picture.
Right.
So what I did was I started with Bob Ford, who is one of the best. It's not for me or anyone to say he's best, she's second best, he's third best. My book is about 30 extraordinary club pros. I could have used 30 others or 30 others or 30 others. But these were the 30 I chose. So I started with Bob Ford. I happen to belong to a lovely national club in Beaufort, South Carolina called Secession Club. And my head pro is also a very top dog. His name is Mike Harmon. So Bob Ford and Mike Harmon formed something of a steering committee for me. Not that I didn't have my own ideas, because I've been around the block. This is my 7th book, and I know a lot of pros, and I've been to a lot of big-time clubs. But I let Mike and Bob give me a list of guys and gals that they thought were exceptional. I added in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other guys and gals that I knew of and knew that I wanted to tell their stories. And once I had 7 or 10 or 12 people involved in the book, those new people made suggestions of their peers that they thought were exceptional. And that's how I had a little bit of a spider web getting myself out to 30 exceptional pros from Massachusetts to Hawaii and from North Dakota to Arizona.
Right. And what's interesting about this, and this is, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that is really lacking in the golf industry, and this is another thing that we want to talk about on the program here at Golf Talk Live, is there's really not a lot of emphasis on the teaching end of it. Certainly you can, as I mentioned earlier off air, you can visit the Golf Channel and things like that and get some great instruction and see a lot of what's happening on the PGA Tour and the other tours and things like that. And, those of us that are certainly passionate about golf want to have that information updated. But we also want to give credit where credit is due to a lot of literally thousands of teaching professionals all over the United States who do a great job in preparing some of these young people who've now made it out on the tour, letting some of them know. We certainly hear of the Butch Harmons and Hank Haney's and things like that as they're involved with some of the top players. But there's a lot of these guys and gals, as you said, out there that are working with these students from a very early age up until the time that either they go on tour or just the average Joe golfer that needs that help. And I think this book is fantastic that you've taken 30 professionals that some of whom you know personally and others that have been referred to you and given them really a voice, if you will, and allow others to be able to understand exactly what it is that they do and how they've affected the game, because it's not just the guys and gals out on tour that do, it's the people behind the scenes, and these are the people that really do it.
Well, you're 100% right. My point is there was no golf spike. Tiger Woods, the most transcendent athlete of the last 15 years, Tiger did not cause a spike in participation. And if Tiger can't do it, then Phil can't do it. And if Phil can't do it, Rory can't do it. So if golf is going to succeed, and we all know golf has been in rough shape for the last 15 years minimum, it's going to be the club professional. It's going to be the club professional, Ted, who encourages, inspires, and instructs.
Motivate.
Golf is going to motivate. and I want to make this point very clear to you and to your listeners. My new book is not about 30 teaching pros, and that's a very simple reason for that. I'm trying to tell in this book, and I'm not trying, I think I succeeded. The early reviews have been great. I'm trying to tell 30 different stories of dynamic, diverse individuals. Are some of them very well-known teachers? Absolutely. But I did not want to emphasize this guy's an instructor here, this woman's an instructor here. Right. These are club professionals. Some of them, to reiterate what I just said, some of them are known specifically for their teaching, but this is a book about the club professional, the people who run beautiful shops, run great tournaments, have PGA Tour or Senior Tour or major experience, are good teachers, motivators, businessmen. Yes, I have some great instructors in this book. For example, Darrell Kestner is one of my 30 pros. He's the head professional at Deepdale Club on Long Island. Darrell is well known for teaching all sorts of, high handicappers, low amateurs, and professionals. Another guy in that same boat who's in my new book, Randy Smith of Royal Oaks Country Club in Dallas. Randy is known as Justin Leonard's and Harrison Frazier's coach, but he's also their head pro because they've been members at Royal Oaks since they were boys. So I definitely have some excellent teachers, but the book is about the club pro. Bob Ford, I'm sure, is a great teacher, but Bob Ford is known more as the consummate club professional. Mike Harmon, the other gentleman I mentioned, my own pro up at Secession Club, I'm sure is a great teacher, but Mike is a fantastic merchandiser and a great buddy, and his camaraderie instincts are amazing. He's brought members to the UK 50 times in his career. So a lot of my professionals in this book are way more than just great instructors. I just want to emphasize that point.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Joel. I think one of the things that people are under sort of a misunderstanding about the club professional is that they're just out giving lessons on a range or on the course. There's a lot more to it. Like you said, they're running great facilities. They're overseeing whatever facility that they're operating out of. Tournaments. I mean, there's a wide range of things that they do. It's not just about giving lessons. And if you ever want to get a great experience, you need to go and visit your local club professional. And we talked about this last week with a gentleman that was on who's a teaching professional up in New Jersey. And, one of the things that we talked about was, kind of where the game is going, and I agree with the comment you made earlier about the last 15 years. Golf has taken a pretty big hit, and everybody might say, well, that's because of what happened with Tiger Woods. No, it's not. I have a theory of my own. Yeah, exactly. It may or may not be right, but one of the things that I've noticed is it seemed for a while there they were trying to make accessibility for the average person to be able to come out and play. And then it's almost like once they had that accessibility, then the industry did an about turn, and now it's gotten a little costly again for some people, and also the accessibility is not as good as it was starting to go there for a while, and there's a myriad of things that are going on. Obviously, the economy has been a big impact to the golf industry, as with any industry, but I just think that it's going to take, as you said, the club professionals. And those that are in the golf industry, not the manufacturers per se, and I'll make a point about that real quick. A lot of the manufacturers are focusing on, obviously they want to sell their equipment, but they're really, in my opinion, focusing on the wrong end of the game. They need to be focusing more on the short game and things like that, and they're more interested about pushing the big drivers and things like that out because, unfortunately, that's what they've taught the consumer to believe that it's all about the driver, and it's really not. It's about the other end of the game. That's where your scoring counts.
You're right.
And
you're 100% right.
Yeah, and there's just, and I'm not saying that, I'm not certainly trying to bash the industry. A lot of club professionals that I've spoken to over the years have all said the same thing, and it's going to take a combined effort. And that's one of the reasons, as I mentioned to you earlier, why I came up with the concept of this program is I don't want to just, get people on here just talking golf all the time. I want them to come on here and sort of challenge the status quo. What can we do to move this industry forward again and get it not only so that it's accessible at the junior level, but also get some of those ones that have kind of given up on golf. They may have been frustrated because of costs, what have you. Get them re-energized and get them back into the game and continue on from there. And that's what I think. And I think this book that you've come out with is one great way to do that, to focus the attention on some club professionals, what they're doing, and how they've impacted the game, other than just teaching lessons. Let me tell you a little bit about the book,
if I may. So for your listeners, once again, the name of my new book is Pros, Extraordinary Club Professionals Making Golf Great. And if you're interested in the new book, it's available exclusively at prosbook.com. So the gist of the book, very simply, is that it is my theory that golf is well down a rocky path from which it may never recover. It's a combination of what you said, manufacturers pushing high-priced equipment, it's high-priced courses, it's pressure on people for time, jobs are uncertain, dual income. A generation ago, a father could go off to the golf club on a weekend, but now mothers are working too, and it's just a combination. And I'm a corporate and professional speaker. I'm not going to get into that part of it because of our time limits. We're here to talk about the book specifically. But if I was doing a presentation, I would spend 10 minutes talking about the many problems that golf is facing. But to sum it up in a sentence, it's lack of time. Oh, you know how I can sum it up for you very simply, Ted? Here's a really good soundbite. Here's why golf is in trouble. Everything we do in the world these days, leisurely, takes 2 hours. A cocktail party is 2 hours. Dinner is 2 hours. Going to the gym is 2 hours. Yoga practice, I'm talking including coming to and from, 2 hours. Movie, 2 hours. Theater, 2 hours. Where do we get off thinking that people have 4 hours or 5 hours to play golf? That's the gist of the problem. Lack of time, lack of funds. The game is too difficult. The game is too expensive. So I'm not convinced that golf is going to survive in the way we know it. We have courses closing left and right. Hundreds are closing a year. My point in writing this book is that if anyone is going to be able to stem the tide, turn back the tide of people leaving the game, it's going to be the club professional. So I wanted to write a book in praise of 30 of the most extraordinary pros around the country. That pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, and that's right on point, Joel. I agree 100%, as I said. And one of the things that we've talked about on some of the recent programs, and again, I don't want to get away from your book because, as you said, that's why we're here, you and I, right now. But I know that some of the other guests that have come on here have mentioned that as well. The time restraint is a big one. Cost is another one. And I think that golf is and the club professionals are going to have to be the ones to lead to do this, because obviously the other industry professionals and things like that are not really taking that sort of leadership role. They're still focused on how much product I can get out there. And really what they're going to have to do is sort of reinvent themselves. As you said, not everybody can afford 4 hours anymore. Not even some of the ones that have a lot of money and belong to some of the top clubs in the country. They just don't have that 4, in some cases even 5 hours left to play. They just don't have the time. There's too many other business or family obligations that are taking up their time. And I think what they're going to have to do, and I know one of the things that they've done, I think is a great thing, is the Tee It Forward program. Getting some of these people from going to the tips, moving them up. That's an area that for years I've talked about with a lot of friends of mine that I've played with that want to go back and play where the top guys play, and it's just not realistic for their game. They're not, tour players. They're not low handicap players. They're high handicap players. Why are you playing from the championship tees? You should be playing, maybe 1 or 2 tees up, and you'll find you'll enjoy the game. So that's something that Tee It Forward program has been very successful in getting people re-energized. And there's a myriad of programs out there. But Joel, as I said, I really wanted to bring you on about your book, and I think it's a fantastic book. And I know that you've worked very hard on it, and you've had some other books. And let me just, before we get back to the one you're talking about this evening, as you mentioned, you had 7 books. One of them was Kiwa Golf, the game's Elegant Island, which you published last year, and actually was honored by the International Network of Golf for Outstanding Achievement in the book category. You also wrote a book on, of course, about Pete Dye, Golf Courses, 50 Years of Visionary Design, and that was published, I know, back in 2008, but it was also a recipient of the International Network of Golf Books of the Year Award in 2009. And as you indicate here, it was one of the biggest selling golf books in recent memory. This one here, I kind of got a bit of a chuckle, A Hacker's Humiliations, which you published back, and that's, of course, been in reprint. And, of course, Misfits on the Link. So there's obviously some, as you said, some humor, I'm sure, in some of the books that you've written. But you've written a whole list of them here, and I think it's fantastic. I kind of, to be honest, I get kind of tired of, going into a bookstore and seeing nothing but instructional books or joke books or things like that. It's kind of refreshing to hear some stories about golf in general, and not just, from the tour players, Tiger Story or Jack Nicklaus. I mean, they're great reads, but there's a lot of other people in this industry that really need a voice, and I think you've done a great job in some of the books that you've written, and particularly this one here, you focused on that club professional.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It's true. Earlier when I talked about the different types of golf books that have been written, I know for a fact because I've written them all myself. I've written the coffee table books. I've written the humor books. But the new book, Pros, is a brand new category, and I'm very happy. How well the book is going to do in the long run remains to be seen, although I will say it's been out a month, and it's been doing extremely well.
Great.
But say ultimately it turns out to be my Pete Dye book was a huge, huge success. Sold on four continents. There were 35 different custom covers made for that book. That was a once in a lifetime thing. Pros is not going to be on that level, but even if it does not perform at the box office, so to speak, to the way that I think it will, I think ultimately it will be very successful. But say I'm wrong, at least I can hang my hat on the fact that it is a brand new, never before done category, a book in praise of the club professional. So at the end of the day, if it all turns out to be, much ado about nothing, which I do not think it will because it's doing great, at least
I don't think so either.
At least I was a pioneer and came up with a new category of golf book.
And that's something, too, that's extremely important in anything, whether it be golf or otherwise. You can't just sort of regurgitate the same old stuff day in, day out. I mean, everybody wants to do a book or wants to do this kind of programming or that type of programming, and it's all the same. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, that was something that I wanted to do a little bit differently here on Golf Talk Live. Was I didn't want to just do the same thing. I mean, you've got ESPN, you've got ESPN Golf, you've got the Golf Channel, you've got scads of radio programs out there that talk about golf and tell you about some local courses and things like that, which is fantastic. But a lot of them, again, focus on the top echelon of the tour, what's happening in Tiger, Phil, Rory's, whoever the hot guy is that week. So what's the point of me coming up with another program that's going to do the same? Why would somebody want to tune into my program and listen to the same thing when they can go to the Golf Channel or they can go to these other mediums to get that information? So I wanted to give them something different that they're not getting already. So again, I don't know how this is going to end up in the long run. It's done very well so far. But I think if I keep it fresh and get some great guests like yourself on here to talk about some things that you're not going to necessarily always hear in some of the other networks, and this gives them an opportunity to come out and talk about what it is they do and what they're trying to do to help continue to move this game forward. So I'm kind of like in the same, I guess, if you will, boat as you are with this particular program, as you are in your current book, is you're getting some success, obviously, and you have a gut feeling based on your experience where things are going to go. But again, we don't know what the golfing gods are going to have for us. But I think it's a fantastic book. And when, as I mentioned earlier, as Nicole was the one that pointed you in my direction, she spoke very highly of you. And when I sort of got a whiff of what the book was about, I thought this is a great book I want to talk about on Golf Talk Live. And since I've mentioned her name, obviously Nicole was one of the club professionals that you put in there. Tell me a little bit about how you and Nicole met and just a little bit of that, and then what your thoughts on her are.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Nicole is the youngest. First of all, let me say this. The PGA of America is about, I think, 3 to 5% women. My book, I have 3 women out of 30, so I'm at 10%. So I'm way ahead of the curve in terms of using women and talking about women in my new book. Nicole is someone I know well. She works here where I live on Skidaway Island, Georgia, in Savannah, Georgia. She's the director of instruction at the Landings Club on Skidaway Island, Georgia. Or actually, her official title is Head Teaching Professional. And Nicole I've never taken a lesson from her. I probably should. My game is not all where it should be, but Nicole impresses me with her enthusiasm, her entrepreneurial spirit, her organization. She's very prompt. She's very polite. In my experience, Ted, because golf pros are pulled in so many directions by members, by greenskeepers, by salespeople, by reps, by the GM, they can be, most golf pros, honestly, including many of mine in my new book, are not particularly responsive. Nicole is cut from a different cloth, and even though she's much younger and much less well-known, she's a real up-and-comer. I wanted her to be in the book. I'll give you another woman that I put in my book, and this name will be familiar to some of your listeners. I wanted to put Susie Whaley in my new book. For your listeners who may not be able to place the name but think it's somewhat familiar, 10 years ago last week, she qualified for and played in the Greater Hartford Open. Now it's called the Travelers Championship. But 10 years ago, Susie won the Connecticut Section PGA Championship, and they paid her a nice check, probably $5,000. And oh, by the way, she got an exemption into the Greater Hartford Open. Now,
fantastic.
10 years ago, in 2003, was a very heady time for women's golf. Annika Sorenstam played in the Colonial that spring. Michelle Wee was 13 years old. She finished in the top 10 at an LPGA major. And Susie Whaley decided to play in the Greater Hartford Open. So when I told you earlier that I wanted to put in different stories about different professionals, I knew that I wanted Susie Whaley to be one of my pros in my book for the simple fact that telling the story, her chapter, in the way I just described, made it different than any of the other chapters. No other woman had qualified for a PGA Tour event since Babe Zaharias in the 1940s. Annika Sorenstam was given an exemption into the Colonial, or invitation. Susie qualified for the Greater Hartford Open, and the beauty of her story, which I detail in my new book, Pros, is that she couldn't decide whether she wanted to play or not. She took 3 months. She took 3 months, Ted, to decide whether or not she wanted to play in the Greater Hartford Open. And then she ultimately decided, because she had an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old daughters at home 10 years ago, that I want to show my daughters that success doesn't mean winning the blue ribbon, or in her case, winning the tournament. She knew she could never compete against the best PGA Tour players in the world. Her philosophy was that winning was trying. not grabbing
exactly.
the brass ring, Ted, but just trying to grab the brass ring was her definition of success. So Susie Whaley, I put her in my book because she was striking a blow for dreamers and underdogs.
Right.
And her point was success means don't be afraid of failure. So she went out there 10 years ago, played in the Greater Hartford Open, and she finished, third or fourth from last. She did not make the cut, but she did beat she did beat 2 or 3 men. And I wanted to tell that story in my new book, Pros, because it's so interesting, it's inspiring, and it's also so much different than any of the other stories in the book.
Well, and that's something that I again agree wholeheartedly. I think is a great story to heaven in your book because, again, it's not about winning the title. I mean, yeah, that's fantastic. That's a bonus if that happens. It's the fact that she can now look back some years from now and say, you know what, I gave it a shot. It doesn't matter that I finished third or fourth, from last place. It's the fact that I went out and gave it my best and I at least tried. And that's a legacy, if you will, more so than even if she could win 100 tournaments. That to me is a huge milestone, especially for the ladies. And I was very impressed with Annika. And I don't want to get into Michelle for different reasons, but again, obviously she went in for different circumstances. But Annika again was breaking ground, and of course now Susie 10 years ago. And I think that's a fantastic story, and it's a lesson because you're right. We learn more from our failures than we actually do from our successes. And that's a fantastic story for people to take to heart. Because everybody looks at the big prize, wow, I want this and I want that, and what do I have to do to get it? But they don't understand that there's a lot of hard work that's put into it and preparation, but as equally so, the fact that you have to motivate yourself to do these things and not just sit back, because nobody wants to look back 20, 30 years from now with regret and say, boy, I wish I had tried that.
Right. That's exactly her thought. She said, ultimately looking back, she's so happy that she decided, because let's face it, she was a little bit more, slightly more than a driving range teaching pro.
Right.
And she's qualified for a tour event with the greatest players in the world. She knew in her heart that she couldn't compete, but she said the experience of being there and taking part was so electrifying that she never could have imagined not doing it, looking back. And now here she is 10 years later. Her profile is still high. She's a rising star in the PGA of America, and she's one of my 30 profile subjects, along with Bob Ford, along with Nicole Weller. And I could tell you briefly about dozens of my pros. They all have these incredible stories. I'll give you one quick example. Jim Langley, he's now retired from Cypress Point. Cypress Point, as many of your listeners probably know, is one of the most exclusive and magical clubs in the world. It's on the Monterey Peninsula, about a couple miles from Pebble Beach. But while Pebble Beach is a resort course that anyone can play, Cypress Point is extremely private. Anyway, Jim Langley's the pro there. He's had the job for 10 years. He gets hit by a car helping to push a member's car off an on-ramp on a nearby highway, gets thrown in the air, loses the use of his right arm from that day forward, and kept the job another 25 years. So Jim Langley is an extraordinary pro, and I was desperate to have him in my book. 35 years at Cypress Point, 10 years able-bodied, the last 25 years without the use of his right arm. And he could still play golf beautifully, one-armed. Wow. So these are the type of pros that I put in my book. I could tell you about another guy or another guy or another guy. They're all fantastic stories, and I try to, give a cross-section of some of the best and the brightest and the most motivating and extraordinary club pros from all walks of life and all over the nation.
Well, and that's key, and that's something, you know, as I've said, and obviously you've touched on several times. This is something that really the average person needs to understand, that these particular individuals and thousands of others that you didn't have in your book are really the key behind golf. They're
100%. 100%. You're right.
I mean, it's without these great men and women, golf really would be nothing. And if you talk to or listen to any of the top players in not only today but years past, I mean, Jack obviously has referred to his teachers over the years. Jack Grout, he talked about many times. In fact, he had him in his well-known now I guess it would be video, but Golf My Way. Of course, he had to sit down and talked with Jack Grout, and then obviously later on, when Jack had passed away, he had to move on to others. But they all have very specific memories of these men and women who helped mold them into who they became. And it wasn't just about telling them about the golf swing and things like that. It was so much more. I mean, Jack, as we all know, and I'm obviously for the listeners, if you haven't gathered, I'm referring to Mr. Nicklaus. But Jack was very well known, certainly not as one of the best swingers or best golfers from a physical standpoint. It was his mental game. And there was a lot involved and a lot of preparation. And I can guarantee you that in addition to his physical game in his time, that Mr. Grout and others that followed played a key role in that. It wasn't all Jack's doing. It was these people behind the scenes. And they don't get as much recognition, I don't feel, as they do. And obviously your book, Pros, is going to do that. And again, Joel, where can they get a copy of that?
My new book is available exclusively at prosbook.com. The book is available in 31 places, just like Baskin-Robbins, Ted. You can get it from the 30 professionals themselves. They are all carrying and using the book, but the place to get it nationwide is at prosbook.com. prosbook, prosbook.com. And it's very interesting you mentioned Mr. Nicklaus and Mr. Grout, because Jack Nicklaus was kind enough to offer a few words in my new book. And the page, we don't call it a foreword, we don't call it a preface, because Mr. Nicklaus is very, very particular about who he gives his seal of approval to. But there is a page in my new book, thanks to Mr. Nicklaus, right before the table of contents, which says, "Praise for the golf professional from the world's greatest professional golfer." And he writes a couple of paragraphs talking about, just as you said, what a tremendous influence Jack Grout was, what like a second father to him, and that all of his success in golf he owes to Jack Grout, and that he was really a pro's pro, and that the men and women who make up the fabric of golf, the club professional, are really the heart of the game. So I'm very fortunate, I feel very lucky that Mr. Nicklaus provided a few words like that in my new book. So what you're saying, you're preaching to the choir when you talk to me about Mr. Nicklaus and Mr. Grout. I'm very happy that I have a page from him giving my, he's not saying Joel's book is the greatest. He's not saying these 30 are the finest pros. He's just saying that he knows what a pro's pro is because he had one mentoring him his whole life in Jack Grout.
Well, I mean, you think about this for a second, we talked about this in a previous show with one of my other guests about education, how important education. It doesn't matter whether it's in your school years or in your job. Education is so important, and without that education, whether, again, you're in golf or some other industry, without somebody that has that experience, able to pass on the knowledge and the skills that they've acquired over the years, it's very difficult. And especially in a game, a lot of people, golf is a very can be a very difficult game in some aspects. And part of the reason is, unfortunately, there are some in the industry that are, and I touched on that at the very beginning, that are more focusing on specific equipment and things like that. So they're really not focusing on where the game, in my opinion, and some others have mentioned as well, really needs to be, and that's more in the short game. And I think that the club professionals are starting to realize that they're not getting that sort of, and again, I'm not trying to knock any of the manufacturers. I think they're fantastic, but at the same time, it's not, I mean, you're only hitting your driver maybe 14 times on most courses around here. In some cases, not even that many, depending on where you're playing. And, the rest of the clubs in the bag get used more often, particularly your putter. And yes, there's been some great books written about putting and things like that, as you talked about, and different training aids and whatnot, and teaching styles. But there really needs to be more in the industry, more ranges and things like that are dealing specifically with that area. And these men and women that you've written about in your book, Joel, are doing some of that. They're not just teaching about the driver, they're teaching all facets of the game, not just the physical game, but the mental game. And now we're getting more into the physical fitness part of it as well, about keeping in shape and that. So there's a whole myriad. And so, these professionals, they're not just talking about the golf swing. They're talking about a whole range of things that they have to know, and they have to retrain themselves.
Let me give you another example that's germane to what you're talking about. We're talking about my new book, Pros, Extraordinary Club Professionals Making Golf Great. And I mentioned earlier that one of the pros in my book is Randy Smith. Randy Smith from Royal Oaks Country Club in Dallas, Texas. Randy Smith is the most decorated club professional in history. He's won more awards than any club pro ever, including PGA Professional of the Year back 10 years ago. Randy Smith's chapter, he talks about how he's paying forward the lessons he learned from mentors that he had before him. For example, he talked about a childhood, when he was a child, a pro that saw him moping around the clubhouse and said, "Why aren't you playing in the junior tournament?" And Randy said, I don't have any money. So the pro reached into his cash register, took out a $5 bill, and said, "Now you have the entry fee." Randy went on to win that tournament, and that sparked his career in golf. He said, "Who knows, I might have ended up an oil pipe fitter in West Texas if I hadn't been taken under his wing." And the lesson he learned that day, Ted, was a good pro doesn't just concern himself with the movers and shakers at the club. They're concerned with all the members, the wives, the children. And this lesson he learned as a 12-year-old, he's applied as an adult pro. And he takes care of or looks after everyone at Royal Oaks. Justin Leonard came to him as a 6-year-old. He's been Justin's coach for more than 30 years. Another lesson that Randy Smith told me that he learned was he once fudged his score in a junior tournament. He shot 80, but he wrote down 79, and he couldn't sleep about it. The next day he went to withdraw. This is when he's a kid, 12 years old or whatever, and the pro looks at him and says, "I can tell you've suffered enough. You don't have to." You can tell by looking at him how miserable he was. He goes, "You've suffered enough. Let's change your score to an 80. And let's go back and finish the tournament." And what was the lesson that Randy learned? He said, sometimes you got to look at the big picture as a pro. Don't disqualify some junior because, because some silly scorecard violation. So the lessons that Randy learned as a kid, he's tried to apply as an adult. And that's why he is an extraordinary club pro, and why I'm thrilled and honored that he consented to allow me to tell his story in my beautiful new book, Pros.
Yeah, and that's really a great point. When I think back different situations in my life and how I was affected by it, it's so true. And I think that this is really something that we need to hear more about in society in general. I mean, we're having to filter out so much garbage now with all of the different medias and things going on. And, there's a lot of great human interest stories out there like Randy's and Susie's and some of the others. that we don't hear enough of. And there's valuable lessons that the youth today particularly could benefit from this, but they're not getting exposed to it. So this is another great reason to buy Joel's book, Pros, because it's full of stories that these men and women have done throughout their life, experiences that they've taken and how they've applied and how it's affected their lives and what they've learned from it. And that's something that we don't always get to hear. I mean, if you know these individuals personally, you might have heard some of these stories, but we're talking of a nation of 300 million people. They don't always have the luxury of meeting somebody like a Randy Smith or Susie Whaler or Nicole Weller, things like that. So here's a great book for the listeners out there to get a hold of. And you want to visit Joel's website, prosbook.com, and get yourself a copy, because this is really what we need to do. Not only as a nation, but as human beings, we need to start putting forth the good stories that are out there and not sitting and dwelling on the negative stories, because all it's doing is bringing a great nation down brick by brick, whereas we need to start building that nation back up. And the way to do that is to start pushing stories like this out there and getting people involved.
Well, that's well said, Ted. And the reason I went off on the tangent about Randy Smith is we were talking about swinging the club. You know, there's more to golf.
Right.
There's more to golf than swinging the club beautifully. Now, it's so ironic. I was talking about Randy Smith because he's one of the great teachers, but his chapter is more about the life lessons that he learned as a boy that he now tries to imprint on his members. So, yeah, can Randy Smith teach you how to be a better golfer and make your handicap go from 13 to 9 or a 9 to a 5? Yeah, of course he can. But that's not interesting to read about in a 300-page book. So I tell the story about, I said, Randy, how did you get to where you are? And he goes, well, I had mentors. And one of the mentors, the first guy he mentions, is one of the most famous pros ever, Harvey Penick. And I'm not going to get into the story about how Harvey influenced him, but, Randy Smith is, they're all exceptional, my pros, but some of them are really top drawer, and Randy Smith is one of those at the very, very top of the professional.
Yeah, and it's funny. While you were just talking this last few moments, Harvey Penick was who I was thinking about, and I was going to mention him, and it's just kind of ironic how you were talking about him as I was thinking about him. But there's another perfect example. How many people that gentleman influenced through his life? Ben Crenshaw, obviously, was one of the most notable. Tom Kite, another notable.
Exactly. Well, they say to Randy Smith, he's the second coming of Penick, because Penick coached Kite and Crenshaw, and to a lesser extent, Randy Smith is coaching and has been mentoring Justin Leonard and Harrison Frazier. And he said to me, well, I'm no Harvey Penick, but then again, nobody is. So he's very self-effacing.
The interesting thing about that, and this just goes to show you the level of, I guess for lack of better words, affection that people had for Harvey Penick, is I remember when Ben Crenshaw won the Masters tournament. And, of course, this was literally right after, I think it was on the cusp, if you will, of when Mr. Penick had passed away.
Yeah, he just passed away literally a few days earlier.
Yeah, and I believe actually some point through that week, if I recall, this is going back a few years, so my memory's getting bad, but I believe he actually, not through the actual tournament, but the week up to the Masters, I think he actually flew back and then came back to Augusta, either just before the first round or sometime early on in the tournament, to make sure and pay his respects. And I remember when he won that, and I was thinking, on the 18th green there, when he just sort of doubled over, and you could just, you could feel the emotion. I mean, I don't think there was a dry eye in that audience.
No, I remember it well. It was 1990. I'll tell you exactly when it was. It was 1995. Is when 95 is when Crenshaw won his second Masters. 96 is when Greg Norman imploded on the final round and Nick Faldo caught and passed him. And 97 is when Tiger burst on the scene, winning by 12. So I do remember my memory is going in some ways, but I remember it that well. And that was 1995 when Crenshaw felt that Harvey Penick guided him.
Yeah.
Penick had just died earlier that week. Crenshaw served as a pallbearer, and he felt like Harvey Penick guided him to that second and very unexpected Masters win.
Oh, no doubt. I have no doubt on that. I mean, there was no coincidence there. This was something, I guess, for lack of better words, of a spiritual nature, and you could certainly see that in Ben Crenshaw's face and in his emotions. And I just think that it just goes to what you're really talking about in this book is just how valuable these men and women are, not only to the tour players and things like that, but to the average person out there. It's not just about taking lessons. There's a lot of great life stories out there, and these people have created a vessel, if you will, of passing some of those life stories. They're not just going to teach you about the golf swing or about golf in general. They're going to teach you about life in general. And especially for you youngsters out there that are taking lessons and things like that, or involved in golf in some of the first tee programs and things like that, what a great way to get involved with somebody who's got not just golf experience, but life experience to help guide and mold you. I mean, obviously we know parents are doing that as well, but sometimes parents don't have time. And what a great way for somebody to share their knowledge and their experiences through the club professional, especially for those that are just starting out in the game. And
let me add this, Ted.
Certainly.
We have a few more seconds.
Yep, certainly do.
We have another minute.
Oh yeah.
Here's something we haven't touched on. Each chapter in my book concludes. There's a lot of young people who are aspiring to be pros or are in golf schools, pro golf management at various universities, or they're training to become teachers, etc. What I want your listeners to know is that each chapter of my book concludes with 2 tips offered by that pro.
Oh, great!
Fantastic. The first is a tip for a fellow player, fellow golfer, and those are the type of tips you read in Golf or Golf Week or Golf Digest, bunker play or driving or mental play. But more interesting is the second tip. And the second tip is from that professional to fellow professionals. So each chapter ends with one of my all-stars talking about member relations or merchandising or keeping the love of the game or how to communicate with your general manager. These are 30 men and women who are at or near the top of the profession, and they're giving advice to all the rest of the pros in the country about record keeping and merchandising and how to purchase right. So I felt that before we wrapped up, I wanted to make that point that each chapter ends with the 2 tips, one for a fellow player and one for a fellow professional. So there's a lot in my new book beyond these mini biographies of who they are and how they got to the top of the game. There's also some real knowledge.
And what's interesting, excuse me, when I had Nicole on a few weeks back, this was one of the things that she mentioned to me about the book, obviously, because as you had indicated earlier, that she's in the book as well. But it's one of the things that she really wants to do, and this just again shows, as you mentioned again earlier, she's the youngest in the book that you talk about, and certainly has a lot of experience in that, but as a up-and-comer herself in many ways. One of the things that she said to me that intrigued her about the program, Golf Talk Live, was this was an opportunity of not only just educating the Joe public out there about some golf and things like that, but this was a way for other teaching professionals to share knowledge with one another, besides just on Facebook and Twitter and some of these other things, from all across the United States. And this is, again, why I want to bring a variety of different types on the program, not just the same sort of shtick, if you will, every week in, week out. I want to bring new knowledge and new experiences and different ideas onto the program because it's not just the average person that's listening to this program. There's a lot of teaching professionals that are tuning in as well, and this is a great opportunity for them to share their knowledge. So if you're listening out there right now and you are a teaching professional, you want to get a copy of Joel's book. And, of course, Joel's been my guest here for the last little while, and he wrote a great book called Pros, Extraordinary Club Professionals Making Golf Great. And as he just indicated, it's not just 30 biographies about a number of top teaching professionals that he's had the pleasure of getting to know. It also provides, as he said, at the end of each chapter, some great tips, one for his fellow players, but also for his fellow teaching professional. So there's some great stuff in this book, and you need to pick up a copy of that book, and you can do so by visiting www.prosbook.com and get a copy of Joel's new book that's just been out. How long has it been out, Joel?
Just about a month.
Just about a month,
and there's thousands and thousands out the door. It's going to be a success. I know it's going to be a success. I feel it in my bones. I've written enough books. I've written books that have sold really well. I've written other books that haven't sold that well, and so I've been in the penthouse and the outhouse in terms of selling books. And if we had a conversation, Ted, a year from now, and I was to tell you, boy, I was wrong. That book tanked. That book didn't do anything. I would be very surprised. I think it's going to do well because, as I said earlier, it's very innovative. There's never been a book in praise of the club professional ever written before. So I'm happy about it, and I appreciate the time talking to you, and I hope some of your listeners might want to pick up a copy at prosbook.com. Well,
I will certainly make sure that link is available not only on my social media but also on my websites so they can, while they're visiting tedandbuckgolf.com and some of the other sites that I have, and obviously the Golf Talk Live Facebook page, I'm going to put that link up there as well so that they can certainly go and get a copy of your book at any point. Joel, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for coming on. I know that you're a busy man, and I know that you've been away for the last several weeks, and you're probably glad to be home. And
I'm glad to be home, except I'm on the road again next Tuesday. I'm going up to New England to speak at a couple of nice clubs. So no rest.
Well, you know what? There never is, and you know what? Just to touch on one thing that you said before I let you go, Joel, is one of the things that you had mentioned about your book. You know, whether it's a success or not, you learned from some of the ones that maybe didn't do as well as you had expected, and I would never classify them as failures. I don't really believe to the extent that anything is a failure, because I think as long as you learn from it, that's success in itself. So I'm sure that some of the books that maybe didn't come out as well as you had thought they would, I'm sure that you've learned a great deal, and they've helped propel you in the future books that you've done, and obviously this current one here. Joel, I want to thank you again for coming on to the program, and much continued success. And you are, as I've said to all of my guests, you're more than welcome to come back anytime, whether it's with a future book or if you just want to talk some golf. I'd love to have you back on the program.
Fantastic, Ted. Well, I appreciate it. Continued success. I think your program is great. I agree that you're doing something a little bit different, and I'll be listening, and I'll be telling my people to listen also. So thanks a million.
And no problem. And I'll tell you what, Joel, just real quick before you go, let's give it one more last plug. You go ahead, Joel, and plug the book.
Okay. For those of you who are interested in my new book, it is called Pros, Extraordinary Club Professionals Making Golf Great. Go to www.prosbook.com, PROSBOOK, prosbook.com. Ted, thanks a million again.
No problem. Thank you very much for coming on, Joel. Much continued success, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you for coming on Golf Talk Live tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye now.
You're welcome, Joel. Okay, you've been listening to Joel Zuckerman, and as he just indicated, he was the author of Pros, Extraordinary Club Professionals Making Golf Great, and you can get a copy of that, and as I indicated to Joel, I'm going to put that up on my sites and so forth, but you can get it at www.prosbook.com. prosbook.com if you want to get a copy of that. I think it's going to be a great book. Well, as I see waiting in the queue here is my next guest is Mr. Tom Shaw. He's actually was a 12-year coach at the Division I level, head coach for Vanderbilt University and Tulane University, and I'm going to bring him on real quick, and then I'll reintroduce him. Good evening and welcome, Tom, to the program. This is Ted. How are you?
Great, Ted. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. If you could just hang tight for one quick sec, I'm going to reintroduce you here just to make things a little bit more official. As I had just mentioned to the listeners here, Tom Shaw was a 12-year Division I head coach for Vanderbilt and Tulane Universities. And during that time as head coach, he helped develop the games of some outstanding student athletes such as former All-Americans and current PGA Tour players, Michael Thompson, who was the 2013 Honda champion, and, of course, Luke List. And also it looks here like he was a caddy for Thompson at the 2008 Masters, for which Michael qualified by being the U.S. amateur runner-up. So I'd like to welcome Tom to the program. And, Tom, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you, Ted. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I've enjoyed listening to a few episodes, especially your previous guest was terrific.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you were able to tune in before, and I know that all of the guests are busy, and I just want to emphasize how much I appreciate that all of you have taken the time to come onto the program and just help people to understand a little bit more about this great game. One of the reasons, Tom, I wanted to particularly have you on, there's been kind of a pattern developing on this program. I started out with one of my earlier guests towards the end of May, Nicole Weller, and she's a head teaching professional up at the Landings Club in Savannah, Georgia. And she deals primarily with junior golfers. I mean, she certainly teaches all levels, but she deals with junior golfers at a very early age. And one of the reasons what really caught my interest with you is that you've done a lot of work with not only the junior golfers, but also at the college level. And that's really why I wanted to talk to you. I mean, I certainly want to talk about what you're doing nowadays and things like that and how you've expanded from that. But I think it's important that we show and talk about how we mold some of these young men and women as they prepare for a career or just playing this great game. And I also want to talk about some of the things that parents need to understand if their child has expressed an interest, some of the sort of the do's and don'ts, if you will, for some of these young golfers and some of the things that you've had to face while you were at Vanderbilt and Tulane, some of the things that you had to do when you had maybe a student that wasn't as good as you thought they were, how you handled certain situations. So first up, tell some of the listeners here what it is that you're currently doing now, and then we'll talk a little bit about the junior golf.
Yeah, what I've gotten into now is advising families of junior golfers who their son or daughter has expressed an interest in playing college golf, and the great majority of them don't know when to start that process, how to start it, who to contact, what the procedure is. So my role is to, as a former college coach who has an in-depth knowledge of the recruiting process and have many contacts in the college coaching world, I can help them. It's a unfairly weighted. The recruiting process is unfairly weighted towards the college coach because they do it every year. Parents only do it most of the time, just one time. So they don't have quite the power that the college coach does. So my job is to equip them with some knowledge and try and level the playing field somewhat so that the junior golfer kind of knows what to look for, what to avoid, what tournaments that maybe he should play in. There's a lot of families out there that are spending a lot of money, probably wasting a lot of money, going all across the country trying to play this tournament or that tournament and trying to get in front of the right college coach or maybe they're seeking a college that's really above the level of their son or daughter, or maybe they don't think their son or daughter is as good as they really are, and so they need to be educated on, hey, this is the appropriate level for your son or daughter. So my job is to kind of answer a lot of questions, equip them with the right kind of knowledge so they're not wasting time, effort, and money on a wild goose chase.
Right, and that's where I guess you were the founder of College Golf Game Plan, which is essentially what that's for, correct?
Right, that's correct. That's something I came up with. There's a few people out there that do that service. There's and as you can imagine with other sports too, recruiting services have really taken off, and there's even on the golf side of it, there's a lot of people that do this. Some are very inexpensive and basically will just take your information and mass email it to various coaches, and that's something you could probably do on your own. My job is to really get to know your young, son or daughter, and kind of get to know what makes them tick, what are their strengths and weaknesses, so I can really implement the proper plan and understand, what they want in a college and help guide them properly. If I don't really get to know them well, then I can't really do my job at really trying to target what's going to be the best place for them. And then if a coach calls me and asks me, hey, tell me about John Smith here, I'll be able to answer that question with complete knowledge and do a good job of presenting to them, hey, here is what this junior is all about, and give them accurate information to where if I never made that relationship happen, then I wouldn't be able to help him out and answer the questions that a coach is looking for.
Right. And I visited, of course, your website, and we'll give all that information out as the program goes on, but some of the questions that some of the junior golfers might have, and as I said, this was from your website, that they might be asking themselves, like, am I good enough to play college golf? I mean, I'm sure that's a question that gets pitched to you quite often. How do I select the right college program for me? What tournaments will get me noticed by the right coaches? That sort of thing. Those are probably questions that you hear quite often over your career. And just kind of go through the process, if you will, at that junior level. Let's take a step back from college for a second. They're at a junior level. They're not quite there yet. What is from your standpoint, what do you feel is the best way, and let's leave the parents out of here for a second, or actually, no, let's start with the parents. Do you meet with the parents sort of the first go around and sort of assess what their vision is for their student, or for their child rather?
Yes, it's kind of a combination. I try and meet with them all at one time. I will, my first step is to play golf with the junior and really use the knowledge I've gained in golf to properly assess, where is this person right now? What's their potential to the best of my ability? What is their current status with an instructor? What do they have a workout program? Do they have a sports psychologist? What steps are they taking to improve themselves? And then I can accurately tell them, hey, here are some steps we need to take. If you truly want to play college golf, and that's really the number one question that I ask them. I said, do you really want to do this? Because if you're just half-hearted about it, then I'm probably not the guy to help you out here. But if they're truly committed to it and truly passionate about playing college golf, and I understand the different levels of programs, and we can certainly talk about that too, because there's a big difference between Division I college golf and Division III college golf.
Sure.
And there's opportunities in all those divisions. But if they want to play college golf in general, I understand kind of the steps that need to be taken to get there. And by playing with a person, as you know, Ted, when you play golf with a person, without them even saying anything, you get to know a lot about their character. It's a chance to kind of pick their brain and ask questions, and they're generally pretty honest. There's not much you can hide on a golf course. You're very humiliated a lot of times based on the shots that you hit. And so a golf course and a golf round is a great first start for me to really get to know somebody well. And so I'll ask a lot of questions just to kind of get to know, what their dreams are, what their aspirations are, where do they want to take this game, how do they see themselves in 5, 10, 15 years. And after that day, I'll get to know pretty much most of what I need to know about them. And then I sit down with the parents and the player after the round and basically tell them, here's what I see, and here's where I think we need to go based on the questions, or based on the answers that your son or daughter gave to me. Here's the steps that I think we need to take. And it's usually fairly eye-opening to the parent, because oftentimes the junior always thinks that they're capable of playing at a high level of Division I golf. The parents sometimes have either an overinflated or underinflated view of what their junior is capable of, and that's part of the education process, because a lot of them don't understand college golf, and frankly, I didn't until I got into the college coaching part of it. There's so many different opportunities and levels out there. There's mistakes that can be made in just getting hung up on playing for a name school. Hey, I've always wanted to go to an Alabama, an Ole Miss, a Texas, big name school, And what happens is that they really don't play. They may get a bag, but they're sitting on the bench the whole time. So is that really the best for their game? When there's many, many other schools that you could play that are on a different level that could actually benefit your game better and give you a chance to play maybe professionally after college, or go into the club pro side of it, or doing something else in the golf side of it, to where you may never get that opportunity if you're just sitting on the bench becoming stagnant in your skills.
Well, and also, too, I think what you probably, and I'm obviously guessing here, but I would imagine that you learn a lot, not so much from the actual shots, and I'm just going back to playing with them on the course. I imagine you're learning a lot by the reactions to some of those, especially those bad shots.
Absolutely.
How they handle those situations, and how they not just about the recovery and things like that, because obviously if they've got any sort of skill, they're going to be able to recover, I'm sure, in most cases. But how they handle that sort of challenge of, okay, I've hit a bad shot. Do they dwell on it? Do they, this sort of thing? Do they beat themselves up over it? I mean, obviously they're going to be a little bit nervous playing in front of you. That's to be an understanding. But at the same time, if they want to get to, especially a Division I level and beyond, they need to have not just the physical game, but they also have to have the mental side of it as well, and need to be able to know how to handle under pressure. Because believe you me, they're going to be under pressure when they get at that college level, and that's going to be really the first opportunity for them to really see whether or not they're going to have what it takes to get out and play with the top professionals.
That's absolutely correct. In fact, I was at a junior tournament this weekend that was here locally, and I was walking around with one of my college coaching friends, and one of my players I was watching play, and he had a really bad hole. One hole he made like an 8, I think, and I was thinking that this college coach was probably going to walk on him and watch somebody else, but he told me, and I kind of thought he might. He said, I want to see how he reacts to this, and sure enough, the young man birdied the next 2 holes. So it showed the coach something that he can take adversity and kind of reorient things a little bit and get back into his normal mode. So I think I think a lot of kids think that college coaches are looking strictly at score when they play in a tournament, and right. they are to some extent, and they're looking at ball striking skills and things like that. But what they really want to see is, in 2 or 3 years, when this young man is possibly going to be part of my college golf program, because as you know, Ted, with golf, you fail a lot more than you succeed, and you're dealing with adversities. You're dealing with adversities almost on a daily basis. So, and along with all this, the other stuff that's lumped onto a college student athlete, especially at a high level, how can he handle this? How can he respond to both success and failure? Because there's equally, if you birdie 3 holes in a row, you think you're king of the world, and all of a sudden a train wreck happens. So coaches are watching mentally how you compose yourself. Do you gird yourself up and continue to plod forward, or do you pack it in and let the moment get to you and sulk the rest of the round? So coaches are looking for a lot of those mental qualities, as you alluded to, that can really stand out at a higher level of golf in college.
Well, and I think as Jack Nicklaus, as I'm sure anybody that knows anything about golf knows who he is, he's always said in his career that the mental side of golf was the bigger piece of the pie, if you will, and rightly so, because if you think about this for a second, Tom, the average person that's wanting to go out and play at a college level, if they're getting there, they obviously have a certain physical skill, or they're not going to get picked for the team. Mm-hmm. But as you mentioned, the coaches are really looking for how they're going to handle their successes and failures. Are they, when they have successes, is it going to go to their head and they get a little full of themselves? Or if they have failures, are they going to sort of beat them down? Because even if their game isn't, for lack of better words, isn't quite up to snuff, the physical part of the game can be an easier fix than the mental side. If they're having difficulties with their ball striking, obviously, again, they're going to be at a certain level to get there anyways, but, you're going to have an off day. But if you can't handle or manage your mental side of the game, if that's where it breaks down, and we've seen this, at the highest levels, we've seen, and I'm sure we could name a few of them, tour players, both on the men's and ladies' tours, that have mentally broken down throughout a round. And we all know that the caliber of player from a physical standpoint is top-notch. But mentally, sometimes you will see a player who may be having a bad round physically or from a playability standpoint not be doing that well, but from a mental standpoint, they're able to grind it out and recover. And of course, Jack was a fantastic person. He's hit some rotten shots over the years, and of course, more recently, Tiger Woods has recovered over the years as well in some of his bad shots. So it's the mental side that really I'm sure that the coaches are looking for more so than the physical. The physical has to be there, of course, but I think the mental is that. Let's Tom, you touched about this on this earlier about the differences between Division I right down to Division III. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's step it up a notch to college. And what are some of the differences for those that maybe are not that familiar between? And you start wherever you feel you need to start.
Yeah, sure. There's three divisions. There's Division I, II, and III, and then you have the NAIA, and then you have the junior colleges too, and then at the bottom of it you have the U.S. Collegiate Athletic Association. So there's, in all, on the, let's just say the men's side, you have over 1,000 opportunities of teams that you could play college golf at, and on the women's side there's probably 700 different programs out there. In Division I alone, there's 300 men's programs and 256 or so women's programs, and those are on the rise too, because some colleges find it easier to begin a women's college golf program and fulfill their Title IX requirements, but that's another issue for another show. And there's differences in playing ability and scholarship. Division I is your, let's just say, PGA Tour of college golf. You have your scoring averages are generally the lowest in that division. Although Division II programs, there are some Division II programs that could play with any Division I program out there. They are top notch. But from a depth standpoint, you could go 1 through 100 in Division I and still find a really, really good golf program. Division II, probably not as deep. Division III is, no athletic scholarships are given in Division III, where there is in Division I and Division II. Division III, there are no athletic scholarships, and it's a little bit more. Golf is a focus of the student athlete, but it takes a little bit of a backseat towards the academic side. So there are people out there that are a little bit more interested in the academics, and golf is kind of a thing they want to do, but it doesn't really take up much of their life. Division III is a great opportunity for them. Schools like Emory and Methodist up in North Carolina have had very successful golf programs and produced incredibly gifted student athletes, men and women, who are great students and great athletes who end up becoming some of your better club pros and people in the golf business, club reps, manufacturers reps. Those are producing some great people. So and then the junior college, there are scholarships there, and that's for kids who generally might need a year or two of seasoning at a junior college before they make the leap up to Division I. It's usually because of grades, although sometimes it's because of playing ability too. But it's usually they need to get their grades up for a year or two at a junior college level before they transfer to Division I or II or III, and that happens a lot. Division I players are plucking guys out from the junior colleges, much like football and basketball do too, and that's a way they're going to fill their lineups. And NAIA is a whole other level altogether. There are different rules involved, but there are scholarship levels, and some of those teams can really play. But Division I is your biggest division, and that's where you're seeing the majority of your PGA Tour players are coming from Division I. Not all, but the majority of them are from Division I schools.
Well, and sure, and because they're playing against the top players at various schools, and it's like any, as you indicated, any sport. I mean, you're going to have, and I hate to use this terminology, but the cream sort of rises to the top. The better players, the ones that are more enthusiastic and more aggressive in their playing, but also in just life in general, are going to move and gravitate to that position. And those that maybe it's not as important in their day-to-day are not going to have the drive and so forth. Something else I wanted to touch on here about college golf particularly, but also with junior. I take that back, with junior as well. You obviously, I'm sure, have been faced when you were a head coach with situations where parents would come in, as you indicated, with either overachieving student or maybe an underachieving. I hate to use that terminology, but you know where I'm going with this.
Right.
How did you find, what was the best way that you found to deal with the situation? Because of the parent or certainly the child. But if that person, let's take the example, let's say, you're now being exposed to somebody and they're just not what, you've been sort of led to believe. And I don't mean that anybody's being dishonest about it, but they're just not where you think they need to be. How do you approach that without sort of turning them off? And you don't want to, as I say, burst the bubble of the child, but you want the parents to be realistic in their decisions as well. So how do you go about that?
Well, that's a tough one, and that's a fine line to walk there. In my current position, I can be a little more, I can be a little more honest.
Welcome to Golf Talk Live. We're here with the tough questions, so I'm not letting you off the hook. Sorry, go ahead.
I think as a college coach, you have to be clear in the recruiting process that once. In fact, I knew of a college coach who basically, because I asked him that same question when I was first starting out in college coaching. I said, "Hey, what do you do with parents who are, really, getting overly involved in the program?" And he said, "Listen, I tell the parents when they drop their kid off, says I don't want to. I only want to see you two more times. That one is when maybe you pick your kid up for winter break, and the other one is when you pick your kid up after school ends in the spring." And I thought that was a little bit harsh, but I think he made that clear. And I think if you make it clear in the recruiting process, and when the junior gets to college, hey, you've entrusted me with your son or daughter for 4 years, so have trust in me to treat them fairly. And of course, there's always some horror stories about things not working out the way they want. But you have to be clear in the recruiting process that, hey, this is the way I run my program. I'd be happy for me to call, but in the end, I'm the coach and I make the decisions. And most parents are great about that. But every now and then, you'll have a parent who especially if their son or daughter is not playing in tournaments, they're going to wonder why, and most of the time the parents are getting one side of the story from their son or daughter, and it's usually not the right side of the story. So you have to educate them on here's what's really happening here with the program. And some parents still do not want to believe that their son or daughter could ever not do something perfectly. So in my position now, as an advisor, I am pretty honest with parents on what to expect, and knowing the coaches that I do. Hey, if you're considering this schools, here's how this coach tends to run his program. He either loves to hear from parents and wants parent involvement, or B, he does not want to hear from you. So know that going into it.
Yeah, and I think that's important from the get-go, that the parents understand, because I'm sure, and we've seen this in other areas outside of the golfing world, where parents get too involved or they have unrealistic expectations. What do you do in a situation where, let's say, as an example, a junior golfer applies and wants to, play at a college, and it doesn't matter what level, whether 1, 2, or 3 or beyond, but let's say they really just don't have what it takes, but they've got the gumption in that. How do you advise them from that standpoint? Maybe they've got a pretty good game, but it's maybe not quite at a level that they need to be. What do you suggest to them there? What their course of action is?
Well, most of them have dreams they've grown up as a fan of school X, Y, Z, and so they've always dreamed of playing at school X, Y, Z. And I try and give them the numbers. I say, hey, the odds of a high school player making it to the PGA Tour, I think right now is about 1 in 5,000. So your chances of making on the PGA Tour are very slim. Your chances of making it on a college team are probably very slim. So let's be realistic. You're a fine player. You could probably improve in certain ways. And in the end, it's going to be the decision of the junior, and he's going to go where he wants to go. So you can only lead a horse to water.
Right.
But you really have to give them the cold hard facts and be honest with them, because their parents are, a lot of them are going to, it's probably not the right term, but they're going to enable their son. Some of them are not going to be as firm as they need to be, and that's my job to say, you know what, I know you want to play for Alabama, but or an LSU or a Georgia, but you know what, they've had two of their, let's take LSU and Georgia for example. They've had two of their former players as college players win professional events and play in the U.S. Open, are you that quality? That's what they're looking for. They're trying to replace guys that have won nationwide tour events, web.com events, have played in major championships. Are you that good? That's what they're looking for right now. They're not looking for, you shoot 75. Could you one day play for an LSU or a Georgia? Well, maybe, but right now they're looking for somebody to replace that's a very good player. So, my job as an advisor is to really kind of give them the cold hard facts and do it in a nice way and say, hey, I know you want to play there, and maybe you can, but let's start at this level. We can always maybe, if our first couple of years at whatever college we pick are really good, we could maybe think about transferring to the school that you've always dreamed of playing, or maybe you may be surprised and find out that the school that you select is actually the right place for you in the end.
Right. Let's just for the listeners here, let's go back a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the other things that you've done in your career, Tom. Just for the listeners that are tuning in right now that maybe didn't catch it at the beginning of this segment, I'm blessed here with my second guest this evening, Coach Tom Shaw, who was a 12-year head coach, Division I head coach for both Vanderbilt and Tulane University. But I also see here, and also let me go back a second here, also the founder of College Golf Game Plan. We've been talking a little bit about his role in that and how he helps sort of put some of the young up-and-coming players together with some of the top colleges and universities here in the country. But I noticed here in some of the information that you sent me, Tom, that you also played for 7 years as a professional golfer on the which is now the web.com tour, but formerly Nationwide tour. Tell me a little bit about your experience there and what obviously you enjoyed it, but what you took away from that.
Well, it was great, an incredible experience that I think about almost on a daily basis in terms of shaping me as a golfer, because I played with many of the guys that are still out there, either on the PGA Tour or still playing the mini tours. It's hard to believe. And a lot of my college coaching brothers, a Mike Small with Illinois, guys like that who have Jerry Haas at Wake Forest, who's now coached there. Those guys I play with a lot on the professional golf tours, and it really made me a better player. It made me understand what it takes to get there, and I was not. Obviously, I never quite made it to the bright lights of the PGA Tour, but I had some successes along the way, and I played with some great players that really taught me a lot. I started professional golf right after I left college at Georgia Tech, and was probably not. I think I defied the odds at every step. I was not supposed to really be able to play at Georgia Tech, and I kind of grinded my way into doing that. After college, I was probably not supposed to be good enough to play in professional golf, and I was stubborn enough to stick it out and play. And not that I achieved the tour status, but I probably did more than what people expected of me. Or if you watch me play, you probably think, well, this guy did way more than he deserved. But it was fantastic traveling the country and meeting people. It's just, as you know, Ted, with the golf business, you meet so many great people in this industry, and people who are still my closest friends are people I met in my travels, and I would not trade it. If somebody says I'm going to try and play professional golf, I encourage them to do it, even if it's only a 1, 2, or 3 year stint. It's fantastic to be able to to wake up every morning, and your job, and this is great, your job is to get yourself better at golf. I mean, that's the greatest job in the world, but it's a hard job because and I tell these juniors and college players coming out, it's much harder now than it was when I was playing it, because there's more people filling the pool, but the fields on the PGA Tour, they haven't increased. It's still 144 or 154 guys every week, so it just gets harder and harder each year. But it was a tremendous experience, one that I'll always look back on with great memories.
Fantastic. I want to bring in something that was actually in my earlier segment with my previous guest, Joel, and I thought this would be a great question really to ask you, Tom. Joel Zuckerman wrote a great book called Pros, Extraordinary Club Professionals Making Golf Great, and he basically wrote about 30 club professionals from all over the United States, and it wasn't just about their teaching abilities or things like that. They were actually short biographies about each of these men and women. And some of the things that came up in the book were about who were their mentors, who sort of mentored them, and of course names like Harvey Pinnock was thrown out there, and of course Jack Nicklaus put something in the foreword of the book about Jack Grout and that. Who were some of the mentors that helped you, not just with the golf aspect, but of your life, who sort of helped you mold and shape you as you went through your beginnings of your career?
Well, I think every person could probably look to his father as being a great mentor and getting you started in the game. And I think back to Joel's book, for a lot of these kids, their PGA Pro is their first exposure to instruction, to the game of golf. So that there's a bond there between the junior player and the PGA Pro that's really strong, and I think one that is great and needs to be cultivated as well. And I think, in my business now, I think it's these juniors lean on the opinion and advice of their PGA Pro. So if I can help out the PGA Pro by kind of getting them up to speed on the timetables of college golf and maybe what's expected for their junior student to the skills that they need to have in order to make the successful transition into college. That's part of my job too, to educate the PGA professional. But many of them played college golf, but they probably played at a time kind of like me. It was a different landscape back then. Your teams were larger. There wasn't the only reason I got to Georgia Tech is because the coach thought I made good grades, so the coach thought I'd be a good GPA boost for the team, and I kind of stuck around probably longer than he would have liked. But it was a different time where you could bring on players and have them be kind of a project and watch them grow. Nowadays college golf programs, the emphasis is on small squad sizes, and coaches are basically recruiting kids. Hey, can you play right away? What can you do for me right now? So it's a little bit different time, and that's a little unfortunate that you can't develop a kid that you see as, maybe he's not shooting the scores that he needs to now, but I see him being developed into a real nice player. So, PGA pros, that was probably the landscape of college golf when they went to college, and now it's a little bit different. So I'm trying to help some of them understand that, their junior golfers expected to probably be, maybe a little have things, all organized and in the bag by the time they come to college. So the PGA Pro is a mentor to a lot of these guys, and it was for me growing up. All the PGA Pro, we moved around a lot, so I was, I had a lot of pros that I looked up to, and even everybody that I met in the game of golf, because I played a lot with adults. I didn't play with as many kids. I played with many adults with my dad. So all those people that we played with who helped shape my game, they encouraged me, they supported me. They also held me accountable when they saw me slacking off and eating potato chips in the clubhouse on a summer day. Hey, get your butt out there on the range and get working. People like that you can look back and say, what, if it wasn't for that guy, I might not be here today. So I think every person in the game can probably point to a long list of players, players in the game, people they've been associated with in golf that have really helped shape them and mold them and gotten them to where they are today.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And just to further the point that you started with, my situation was the same. My father obviously loved the game of golf, and of course I got bitten by the bug at a very, very early age, and just fell in love with it. And I didn't certainly play on any tours of that nature, but I just had a great experience growing up playing golf in a variety of different forms, and of course I teach as well. But and I've always wanted, as much as I would love to have made it out on the PGA Tour, I'm going to be 50 next year, so maybe there's still some hope for the Champions Tour, but we'll see if that card comes true or not. It's up to the man above what he has planned for me. But one of the things that I want to talk about with you, because I think that you're dealing with at a very crucial age in a golfer's life. We've got, as I mentioned earlier, a previous guest. She's dealing with it at a very, very young age, but they're really not thinking about college. They're not thinking about that age. What are some of the things that you see now going on? Because there's obviously been, as Joel had mentioned in the earlier segment, the last several years, decade plus, golf has taken a pretty big hit. Not only financially, I mean, even though purses have gone up in some ways, the industry in itself has taken a bit of a hit. Courses have run into problems. But I think also something, too, that we talked about in the segment, but also my previous guest from last week talked about, is that with some of the manufacturers tending to sort of push towards the driver and the big hitters and things like that, and not really focusing on the short game. What are some things you'd like to see? My question is this: what are some of the things that you'd like to see in the golf industry focus on more that's going to help the younger people getting into the game, and also even some of the ones that maybe have sort of fallen by the wayside, that have given up because they're just out of frustration? One of the things that we talked about was more focus on the short game, ranges, instead of building ranges to hit them 300 plus yards. Design some golf ranges around the short game aspect more to prepare. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would agree with you on that. I think the short game is huge. It's something that I love to teach, and I think is a skill that most of my junior golfers could improve on significantly. I think they get hung up on, as you mentioned, distance. How far can I hit this, and how far does this 5-iron go? Well, how many times during the round are you going to hit a 5-iron versus hitting a wedge or hitting a finesse shot or around the greens? And I don't think enough golf courses have. I'm a huge fan of golf courses that have true practice ranges that have a short game area that is complete. We just don't see enough of that, even down south where grass grows all year round. I love going to a Sea Island golf club down on the coast of Georgia. The short game area is fantastic, and I wouldn't even have to hit a golf ball in the range. I could spend hours on the short game area. And I think when kids are presented with an opportunity to do that is fun for them. Hitting balls is fun too, and I think probably hitting balls is more fun for maybe the younger age kids. For the more developed golfer, I think being around a good short game area with good turf and a whole variety of shots. So obviously it's going to benefit their game in the long term, but it's fun for them, and they're going to spend a lot of time on there. Now I'm very old school. I'd like to see everybody go back to persimmon woods and
I'm with you.
And have to worry about, hey, you know what? The swing needs to be controlled. It doesn't need to be flat out 100%. I find that with a lot of junior players, they just want to hit it hard all the time, and I don't think that's the right way to really play your best golf. But I get it. The distance is so preached by these manufacturers that I understand that. I think we could have a little bit more focus on the short game, have a little bit more focus on controlling the ball. And I think these juniors would gravitate towards something that's a little more fun. I know you guys talked about the 2-hour time frame. I think kids are going to be out there for as many hours as you want to give them, because that's just fun. But their attention span is a little limited. So if you had a nice short game area that allowed them to stay in a limited space, but kept it variable and fun and new in the span of 1 to 2 hours, I think they'd get more out of that than just hammering balls and almost dying of heat exhaustion for 2 or 3 hours on the range, or having to drag it out and hit bad shots on the golf course. I think they may gravitate towards the game more if they had a nice area, fun area that gave them kind of a short little quick fix in the golf, and I might get more people into the game.
Well, exactly. And one of my guests last week, which was in the latter segment, such as yourself, was PGA professional Trent Warner. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not, but sure. He operates up in Englewood, Colorado, and he wrote a really great book that we talked about last week called Golf Scrimmages. And if you're not familiar with it, you do have it?
I do have it. It's great. I've used it with my college programs. It's terrific.
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go with that. This is what I'm talking about, and he and I talked a little bit about this, and he said that one of the things that he would like to see more teaching professionals, club professionals doing is working from the short game back. In other words, working from the putting back up and not so much focus, and I'm not saying a lot of them are, but not so much focus on the big hitting and things like that, but working from around the green and that. And I know from my own experience when I was growing up in that, some of the older courses and that did have, the driving range was very limited. It's not like it is in some of the big courses today. But I can remember practicing around that, as the day sort of dragged on, people started going home. I remember talking to the club pro that was working there. I said, look, do you mind if I go out with a few balls out on the practice range, not hitting balls, but just working around the green? And I would, practice for hours and hours, invent all kinds of games. Some of them were in Trent's book, but some of them obviously weren't. But and I actually got to a point where my short game got so finely tuned that it didn't matter if I hit it in the left rough a little bit or if I hit it here or there. I was able to recover with confidence because of that short game. And that's something we touched on. And I think that's extremely important at the college level as well, that they really hone on that, because, you can bomb it like a Bubba Watson or some of these other top players, but if you can't recover from that shot, because you're not always going to hit it in the fairway, as we know.
That's right.
You need to be able to focus on that short game and rely with confidence on it. And obviously at the top level, most of them are practicing that. But at the college level, like you said earlier, maybe a lot of them are not focusing as much. So what are some other things that you'd like to see maybe change in the golf industry from your perspective that would help nurture some of these young men and women that are coming up?
Well, I think the nice thing about a good short game area is that it just gives them more of an instant feedback. When you're on the range, you hit your 5-iron. There's no, you can watch the ball flight and judge success, failure. But when you're doing games, scrimmages, as Trent would say, around the green, you're achieving a score, and it's immediate and quick. And that's why I like to construct these short game drills for players. I want them to have to achieve a score. If you're just doing a drill just to do a drill, it gets a little boring. If there's a competitive aspect, especially for guys, you start tapping into the competitive instinct for males, and now you have something. It takes on a whole new angle when you're. I know there's NCAA frowns upon gambling, but that's just golf is. Through the history of golf, there's been wagers, there's been bets, and I think if you're just playing for a Coke or something like that, that's fine. But I think with designing practices that encourage the competition, where there's some kind of pressure on the line, that is much better for colleges. But I think that, going back to what you said, the average college player hits it extremely well. Their ball speeds are a little bit higher than the PGA Tour. There's some guys on college that can absolutely fly it past a Tiger Woods or Gary Woodland or guys like that, and it's going to continue to come out that way. But what these guys cannot do is they don't know whether their lob wedge is going to go 70, 90, or 110 as well. So they're missing greens with scoring clubs, and so one aspect of range creation would be to have target greens that were actually legitimate target greens, where somebody could hit a short iron or a wedge shot and be able to judge, that's a realistic green, that's a realistic shot. That ball either missed the green, hit the green. I can judge the spin, and I know that's a little expensive for somebody to create a range like that. But if they can hit balls on a range where they can simply, more than just watching the ball fly in the air, but if they can kind of see where it lands, so they can then make judgments and get feedback on, hey, where did this shot? What do I need to work on? Obviously, I'm missing greens with a 9-iron. I need to know for a fact that this ball either lands on the green or doesn't land on the green. So, I think in practice areas, it's probably a little more of a challenge to create a range like that has nice enough greens to do that, but something that can give a player a little bit more feedback than simply while watching the ball fly in the air, not really knowing how much or how far it goes, and we all don't have a $25,000 TrackMan sitting behind us that tells us these things. So the average golfer is dealing with just watching in air and making judgments about what that, and it may or might, in the end, it may or may not be the kind of shot that they're looking for. So I'm not savvy enough to say what the industry needs to do. I think they do some incredible things, and I would certainly like for them to if there's any way to remove or limit or reduce the emphasis on power, and I know I'm probably in the minority on this, but I would, I'd like to see it return back to the game where it's still the control was an issue, and you did have to swing kind of within yourself to maneuver it down the fairway, and there was a penalty if you didn't hit in the fairway. And I'd love to return to that. I know that the cat's probably out of the bag on that kind of thing, but I can always hope.
Well, one of the things, and it's kind of interesting that you say that, up until recently, I mean, I'm like you. I'm old school. I believe in sort of ratcheting things back a little bit. I just think the game has gotten to. I'm kind of on the same side as Mr. Nicholas as well. I just think that some of the technology, I mean, as wonderful as it's been, has just gotten so disproportionate, especially for the long part of the game, and they're not really focusing on the short game. And one of the things that we talked about last week was, as an example, I remember, and I'm sure you probably remember this, one of the first people that came out on the PGA Tour with a bag full of wedges was Tom Kite. Mm-hmm. And, he was one of the first ones to have that fourth wedge in the bag. And, right after, almost immediately after, you started hearing about that, everybody was throwing a bunch of wedges in their bag. But the problem was they didn't know how to really utilize them. And right. Nobody was really at that time teaching them really the purpose of having these different wedges. I mean, Tom would talk about it in some of the instructional videos that they did back when VHS was still around. But, they didn't really understand what he was trying to do. And, of course, a lot of the tour players followed suit, but they had the benefit of a top-notch coach on hand and so forth to help direct them. But this is something, too, not just with the equipment, but also really understanding not just sort of following a trend and doing. And I'm talking now not the tour players, but I'm talking about the average golfer out there. Just because so and so is playing this or so and so is doing that, like for years, and I hated doing this. I liked the longer irons. I really was not comfortable when the hybrids and that first started coming out. I mean, I liked my 2-3 iron. I even had a 1 iron in for years, and my friends. And it's true what they say. God is the only one that can hit a 1 iron, but I gave it my best swing. But the thing was, I enjoyed that challenge, and I've always played a blade. I've never played any of these perimeter weighted and things like that, where the oversized heads and things like that. I'm not talking about the drivers, of course. I'm talking about the irons. Right. I just never felt comfortable. And, a lot of people would look at me, but I mean, I had the game to support it. Right. And I understand why they came up with these things, these game improvement irons, and I think they're great to have. But what it's done is it's taken away the ability, except for at the highest level, and even that to a point, the sort of the shot making ability, because everything sort of compensates for it. And I used to love, taking those longer irons, and sometimes if you didn't hit it quite flush, you got a bad result. But that was the fun of it. It was a challenge. Yeah. I'm right there with you, and I think with a lot of these juniors, they're being taught to or encouraged to swing as hard as possible, which I think there's definitely a lot of data out there that says there's periods in males and females where they need to develop. Those are their power years, and I get that. But I think telling somebody to swing, designing a club to allow you to swing as hard as possible to have some faulty mechanics, and we're still going to create a club that's going to send the ball out there a pretty good ways and pretty straight, I think is discouraging people from really creating proper mechanics. And again, I'm probably in the minority here, but I think I've seen a lot of kids who become fairly mediocre iron players and wedge players because their swing is predicated upon swinging a driver at 110% without regard to proper impact, because you can slap at it and still get it out there pretty good, whereas an iron, especially a blade, there's things that need to line up in proper order and importance to be able to hit a 3 iron, a 2 iron, as you mentioned, properly and with height and all that. So I think some juniors are being not being taught in the right way. There's obviously have to create power and swing hard, but at another stage they need to be taught impact positions that are proper. How do you control your wedge shots to make sure one wedge doesn't go 70, the next one 90 from the same swing? And I just hope we're not breeding a generation of
iron players that are kind of mediocre, but they're really good drivers and they hit it long, but their iron play and wedge play is not that good.
Well, if you look at some of the players, even the top players today, I can think of one off the top of my head who's a phenomenal iron player is Luke Donald. And I've mentioned him a few times on the program. He's got a very solid iron play. He's not certainly the longest hitter out there, but he has a long, or rather a phenomenal iron game. And, he's not winning every tournament. I mean, the competition, this is one thing I think people forget, is they say, well, if he's such a great player, why isn't he winning more? You're talking about an industry where there are literally thousands of people playing golf week in, week out, and on the PGA Tour and the LPGA and so on and so forth, you've got some of the best players out there competing week in and week out. And you're not going to dominate. I mean, Tiger certainly did for a long period of time, but I truly believe this, and I don't want to get into a long thing about him, but I truly think in his earlier game, one of the reasons he did dominate is there was a lot of intimidation factor, much like Nicklaus did when he first came out and started winning tournaments like that. There was a sort of an intimidation amongst the other players. But once they were able to break through that, you notice he doesn't dominate anymore. And right. I think that you're not going to see that. I mean, from time to time, you're going to see a player that may come out and win a bunch of tournaments and may take that role. But I think people are smarter now. They're starting to see, okay, you know what? Even the best guy out there can be beat. I've just got to do certain things in my game, and I've got to worry about me and not worry about him. And I think when Tiger first came out in '97, he came out gangbusters. He was a young man, physically fit. I mean, he was a little scrawny at that time, but, as time went on, he got more fit. But he was able to intimidate the rest of the tour for that period of time. And I think that's really what, and I'm not taking away, obviously he had a phenomenal game, but I think that was really his edge, much like Nicklaus had. And over time, the other players started to sort of see through that and say, okay, you know what, he can be beat. It's just going to be a matter of me doing this, and this. And I think that's what's really needed is some of the better players that are out there right now need to focus on sharpening up their game and not worrying about who's up on the leaderboard, but worrying about their short games and tuning those up. Because even Tiger would hit stray tee shots, but his short game was so in tune that he was able to recover. And I think that's where some of the other players may be lacking, is they can belt it out there with the best of them, but their short game is not as up to snuff as his was.
Well, I would agree with that. And, I've been through Q school more than a few times, and I've yet to see a guy who really was a great wedge player and putter not make it through Q school. I've seen plenty of guys that failed to get it past the first and second stage that were phenomenal ball strikers. But
right.
You gotta if you're gonna have one thing, you better have the putter. If you're gonna have two things, have the putter and the wedge. And then if you can hit it adequately out there in terms of length and kind of keep it between the OB posts, now we're talking. And then you add some better ball striking and a little more power. Now you can be a world class player. But it all starts with the short clubs, the putter, the wedge. I try and preach it to these junior players, and especially on the college levels. And a lot of them don't either refuse to acknowledge it, or they take what you say in one ear and out the other, and they don't learn it until they turn professional. And I've had more than one guy come back to me after he's been around the mini tours for a while, and he says, like, this is the first time I've ever heard it. He says, Coach, did you know that the putter and the wedge are really important? I just look at him and roll my eyes like, I only spent 4 years telling you that, but I'm glad you came to it right now. That's good. So better late than never.
I'm just going to say that better late than never. Tom, why don't you just quickly, if you can, let people know how they can get in touch with you if they want, if they're interested in what you're doing. Where's your website? And
website is www.collegegolfgameplan.com. It's all one word, collegegolfgameplan.com. I'm on Facebook at that as well, and Twitter, College Golf Plan. At College Golf Plan is my Twitter address, and I'll have some updates on there as well. And my cell phone number is on the website. And if I think the big thing for juniors and club pros and parents is to realize start earlier than you think. I get a lot of interest from kids who want to play college golf, but they've just waited a little bit too long, so their options are there, but they're a little bit limited to what they could have been if they had started a little bit earlier. So that's the one thing that I would stress to anybody who either knows somebody that wants to play college golf or a junior who wants to play college golf. Start earlier than you think. Start the process. Start identifying which tournaments I need to play in, and start making sure the support team around you, the club pro, the physical fitness, everything is in tune and helping you to become a better player.
Fantastic. Tom, just a couple more quick things. One of the things that I've talked about here on Golf Talk Live over the last month or so is one of the things I'm gearing up for, and obviously I want to have a bunch of different types of guests, if you will, some of the teaching professionals, but also different areas of the game and things like that, is one of the things that I'm planning on with this program. If you've tuned into some of the earlier ones, you'll understand where I'm going with this. I want to develop a segment, if you will, which I'm going to call Coach's Corner. Originally, I was going to do this, on a blog and things like that, and I thought, no, I would rather do this in a live sort of format. And the premise of that segment, Tom, is I want to have more than just one person on at the same time. Maybe get two or three professionals and so forth. Yeah. On at the same time, and create a forum where the listeners can either call in or email in ahead of time, or call in during the program or email ahead of time, questions or things, and let the coaches, if you will, take turns or collectively respond to those questions. And the reason why I want to do that, Tom, is because there's a lot of, as I mentioned to Joel, and again, I'm sure you've probably heard this if you've tuned into any of my other segments. There are a lot of great places to go and get some golf information. Golf Channel, ESPN, I've mentioned a number of times, has their own areas that you can get up on the stats and what's happening on the tours and that. But there's really not a forum out there that I've come across, other than blogs and websites, that you can go and either call in or email or text or what have you, where you can get access to not just one or two teaching professionals, but a variety, and I want to rotate them out. As an example, if I have three of them on, every week I want to have a different group on. And I don't want just the men on, I want some of the ladies on as well, and give sort of a broad spectrum of teaching ideas and theories and things like that, and just an opportunity for the Joe public out there, and even some of the other teaching professionals, to collectively come together through this vessel, if you will, and give the people a little more of what they're really looking for out there, and give them an opportunity to interact with the public more. And this is something I want to do. And I would certainly love to include you in that as well. I mean, you have a vast amount of experience. So in addition to that, Tom, I certainly want to extend an invitation, as I have with all my guests. You're welcome to come back anytime beyond the program. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I really, as I said, I wanted to have you on here for my own selfish reasons. I wanted to learn a little bit more about the college process and also junior golf, but also I know that just from reading through some of the information that you sent me, that you're a hard worker and you believe in as you mentioned, old school, and I'm along those lines as well. So I wanted to have you on here, and I want to have you back as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't allow you to. I also see here at the very bottom that your wife Sherry, and that maybe you want to just mention that a little bit about her, and also I know you have two children. You can certainly go ahead and plug them, if you will, on the program.
Well, as I heard somebody say, but behind every great man is a very surprised mother-in-law, and that would be the case. A wonderful wife who supported me in every possible way, which you can't be successful without it, and my great kids, Ryan and Katie, who are growing up like weeds, but love them both. We're a team all together, four of us, and moving forward in this crazy game of golf.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I see here, and I didn't mention in the beginning, but you now live in Franklin, Tennessee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Just south of Nashville. Beautiful town of Franklin. Very historic. We're very comfortable here, and hope to make it our home for a long time. Yeah,
Tennessee is a fantastic. Tennessee is a fantastic state. I've been through it many times, been to Nashville, and planning on going there again soon. So I'll have to maybe get in touch with you next time I'm up that way, and we'll get together for a few moments. But, Tom, just as I wrap things up here quickly, I want to thank you very much. My guest on the second half of Golf Talk Live tonight was Coach Tom Shaw from Franklin, Tennessee, and he's been on here talking a little bit about college golf and a little bit of golf in general. again, Tom, you're welcome to come back anytime. I appreciate you taking this time. I know how much how important family time is for everybody, so I appreciate you taking this time out this evening, and I hope you will come back and support Golf Talk Live in the future.
Ted, you have a great show. I was honored to be on here. I appreciate it very much.
Not a problem. You have a great evening, and go enjoy your family.
Okay. Thank you, Ted. Night.
All right. Take care. All right. Okay, you've been listening to two great guests this evening. My first guest, Joel Zuckerman, who is the author of Pros, Extraordinary Club Professionals Making Golf Great. Fantastic book. And it's available at www.prosbook.com, his website. So make sure you go and get a copy there. And obviously, we just wrapped up with my second guest, Coach Tom Shaw, who is a 12-year Division I head coach at Vanderbilt and Tulane University. And he certainly had some great information here to talk about the college perspective and what was needed to prepare your young ones, if you will, for junior golf and things like that. Some great information. I want to continue to bring that here on Golf Talk Live. I want to thank you for listening in this evening. Just to remember, in future programs, as I said, we're working towards that Coach's Corner and wanting to get some more top teaching professionals from around the country and around the world. I've had a number of interests coming from overseas as well, wanting to come on the program, so hope you'll tune in for that. Don't forget to visit our Facebook page, Golf Talk Live, at facebook.com/Golf Talk Live blog. Make sure it says Golf Talk Live blog on there, so you'll get directly to the link, and throw a few likes my way. If you want to contact me with questions for some of the guests, you can email me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. That's ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. Or if you want to call into the program while the guests are on. I didn't do that this evening. I didn't give out the number this evening, mainly because I had the two guests on and I wanted to really spend the time speaking with them. But in future, we're going to be certainly pushing for more of that. We certainly want your input on the program, some suggestions, of course. We're always willing to do that. The number is 646-716-4667. So remember that for future. And if you want to listen to this, the live broadcast is now ending, but it's auto-recorded, so you can visit blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. In a few moments, it will be loaded up, and if you missed the live segment, you can go and listen to the show at that time. Next week, just real quickly, the last few seconds here, my guest, of course, we wrapped up the month of June. It's been a great month. We had some great guests on this month. And next month, starting on July 4th, Don Law, top PGA teaching professional, and founder of the Don Law Golf Academy, is going to be coming on the 4th, which is next Thursday. I know it's a big day for everybody here, Independence Day here in the United States. And certainly I know that Tom is going to be busy doing things with family and that, but I appreciate him taking out the time to come and talk with me here on Golf Talk Live. So that's July 4th. And then following him on July 11th, the following Thursday, is Mr. Chuck Evans, who is the Executive Director of Instruction at Medicus Golf Academies out in Kansas City, Missouri. So I hope that you will tune in. And I ask you to seek the challenge, if you will, to let your golfing buddies know about Golf Talk Live here. So give them the link. It's blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. We're here live Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time every Thursday. And as I said, if you're not able to join us on Thursday evenings live, you can, shortly following the live program, you can hear the recorded version at the link I just gave you. That's blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. Thank you very much for tuning in this evening. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. You've been listening to another segment of Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody, and have a great evening.